What's something most people consider a green flag, but to you it's a red flag? We just love bravado and confidence, even when it's unearned. I see this specifically in workplaces. I have spent years watching people like this get lavished with praise after dominating meetings despite there being people in the room with more expertise, and it's always been confusing to me that we think unearned confidence, or being the loudest person in the room, is clearly a sign of a competency. I've been on far too many hiring committees where this is seen as a green flag, and it's really not.
It's interesting how often people mistake confidence for competence. I've noticed it too, especially in meetings. You see someone who speaks loudly and often get praised, while the more knowledgeable people sit back. It makes you question what we value in workplaces. I've been in hiring situations where the loudest candidates got the nod, even if it didn't make sense. You'd think expertise would matter more.
When someone's too into systems and frameworks right from the start. You know, those people who have everything perfectly organized, every minute planned, every goal meticulously tracked. Used to think that was admirable until I realized it could be a mask for control issues or fear of genuine connection. Don't get me wrong, I love building systems. But there's a difference between creating structure to support growth and using structure to avoid messiness. Real relationships, real growth, they need space for chaos, for mistakes, for figuring things out as you go. Sometimes the people who seem to have it all perfectly together are actually the ones most afraid of letting life actually happen. They're so focused on optimizing everything that they miss the beautiful mess of genuine connection. Learn this one the hard way, both by being that person and by trusting that type of perfection in others. Now I get nervous when someone's life looks too perfect on paper. Give me authentic mess over polished performance any day.
I get what you're saying. I used to think being super organized was the goal. I had a friend who had a plan for everything, but it felt off. Turns out, they were just trying to keep everything under control. I've learned that real connections need room for flaws and surprises. Life isn't just a checklist. I'd rather deal with the unpredictable than a perfectly curated life that hides fear. It's a lesson you pick up on your own.
Not just for romantic relationships, someone who tries to get to know you too quickly. Oftentimes they're not deepening the strength of the relationship on their side, and are just trying to get dirt on you. Pay attention to the depth of their answers, and if it's not genuine or actually just surface-level information masquerading as deeper, that's a red flag.
Yeah, I've seen this happen before. A friend of mine got super close to someone way too fast. At first, it seemed cool, but then it felt off. This person would ask a ton of questions but never really share much about themselves. It was like they were just gathering info. It kind of made my friend pull back and reconsider if the relationship was worth it. Good call, honestly.
I used to very openly project my financial success, even at times when I wasn't doing that well, as a way to attract women, and it worked well for me and for the women. Nowadays, if I was single, I would very much avoid any women who became attracted to me based on my displayed financial success. I have learned that women who are attracted to successful men are the norm, but are also the biggest red flag ever.
It's interesting how perspectives change over time. At one point, I also thought projecting success would help in dating. It might attract attention, but it often feels like people are more interested in your status than who you are. Real connections come from genuine interest. Now, I'd much rather have someone who appreciates me for me, not for what I have. It's a healthier approach.
Yup, I see all these Reddit threads of green flags that people have encountered in their lovely spouse, and literally all of them can be done for show. I even watched a YouTuber who explained why she doesn't list the qualities of a good man, because that could be a manual for any manipulator. They all know to treat waitstaff well, so we think they are good people.
Yeah, I get that. It's kind of like you never really know someone until you see how they act when no one's watching. Sometimes people can put on a good front just to impress others. It's frustrating when you realize that some of those green flags might be just for show. It makes you wonder if genuine qualities even matter anymore in relationships. You have to dig deeper to find the real person behind the facade.
I think it depends how much can both parties handle. I haven't had that happening at a romantic level, but a person should know much they can tell to someone else right away. For instance, tell me about yourself. Well, I could tell you I'm not from my country's capital, and that may lead to conversations about geography or travel within my country. I can tell you funny/awkward anecdotes of my teenage years and how they've shaped me to who I am, and so on. But yeah, if someone asks me follow-up questions about my hometown, childhood memories, my school, and so on, I think I'll start worrying if it's genuine curiosity. Nothing wrong with that. Someone who's bad at talking and they're better listeners, or they're actually trying to get something out of me.
It's interesting how people approach sharing personal details. You have to gauge the vibe to see if they're genuinely interested or just fishing for info. I've had conversations where I start opening up, but then feel like I'm giving too much too fast. It can be a fine line between connecting and feeling exposed. You just have to trust your instincts on whether it's the right moment to share more.
I completely disagree regarding the dark sense of humor. I have one of those myself, but agree entirely about the punch-down type of humor. In fact, I don't think someone finding those kinds of punch-down jokes funny is 100% a red flag. A dark sense of humor can often be based on past trauma and is often a defense mechanism. If that darkness is self-deprecating, they are probably directing that emotional/psychological damage inward. You might need to be careful about how you treat them. They, I know this is true for me, can take minor criticisms to heart far too easily, but they are otherwise probably fine. If it's punch-down kind of stuff, they're taking all that hurt out on those they consider to be vulnerable targets, i.e., unable to fight back. And I would suggest that you run a mile. Those two things are entirely different behaviors.
Humor can be tricky. I have a friend who loves dark jokes, mostly because of stuff they've been through. It's their way of coping. I get that. But then there's the other side, where some jokes just make fun of people who can't defend themselves. That's where I draw the line. If someone only laughs at that stuff, it's a sign to be cautious. There's a big difference between coping and being cruel.
Now my husband proved himself. It depends what you think a red flag is. The true meaning of red flags, my husband didn't have any. Yes, I found out 1 or 2 issues that he had after marriage. We dated for marriage specifically, but I didn't expect him to be perfect, and he worked on himself from the beginning, and the 99% good to 1% bad ratio is the best you can get from humans, since perfection is impossible.
Sounds like your husband is pretty solid. It's nice to hear that he worked on his issues and that you both have a realistic view on relationships. No one is perfect, and it's clear you value the effort he puts in. That balance you mentioned makes a lot of sense. It's good to focus on the positives and grow together. Relationships are about partnership after all.
I get that not everybody had the luxury of having good parents, or they themselves are not cut out for sustaining such a relationship. But you shouldn't think that's normal or healthy, just maybe necessary in very unfortunate cases. If you ever get into parenting, it should absolutely be your goal to be close to your kids through their lives. What do you even mean by radical thoughts?
I think what you're saying about parenting makes sense. I'm lucky to have supportive friends, and I've seen how important that bond is. It really helps shape who you are. Growing up, I had some friends who didn't have that connection, and it was tough for them. It's all about trying to do better and be there for the next generation, I guess. We need more of that.
Buying things excessively. Saying I love you more than normal. They focus on you, and only you for that moment, and only that moment. Overly nice. Suddenly, they remember your favorite dish or drink. Will prep that, but only does this when they think they are in trouble, or they think you are becoming uninterested. They do it for self-preservation as opposed to doing it cause they want to see you smile. They can't just walk up to you and give a kiss or a hug, then continue on with whatever. They have to grab you and hold your attention. They need to hear you say "ah." You are their source of superiority and feed their ego.
It's interesting how some people show love in ways that feel a bit off. Like they shower you with gifts or cook your favorite meal, but it almost feels more about them needing reassurance than genuine care. They can't just casually show affection, it has to be this big moment. It makes you wonder if they're really into you or if they're just trying to boost their own confidence. It can be exhausting.
I'm a dude who has had more friendships, both in terms of quality and quantity, with women since I was a teenager. Every now and then I noticed that pattern when all of my Windows Messenger tabs were women. Yeah, Windows Messenger, I'm old. Then it happened with Facebook's algorithm, and the people I interacted the most were women too. And now it happens with Instagram. I hope I'm not a walking red flag. See, because most of those women were slash are my friends, and I have no other intentions with any of them.
It's pretty interesting how friendships can develop, especially across different platforms. It seems like you just connect better with women, and that's normal. It's good you value those friendships without mixing in other intentions. A lot of people focus on quality over quantity, and it looks like you've found a solid group. Just stay true to yourself and keep it friendly. It doesn't make you a red flag at all.
Depends. One of my first major relationships, so college, my now ex was the type to be very jealous. I couldn't hang out with, talk to, or communicate with other women. By the end of that 2.5 years, when I walked away, I realized I had isolated myself from all female relationships in my life because I thought I was in a healthy relationship, and that's what I was meant to do, obviously not true. Now, years later, of course, I'm married to a woman that realizes I'm an educator, and in an industry that is female-dominated. But of course, like 80% of the people I talk to on a daily basis are women.
It's interesting how relationships can shape our lives. That jealousy can really make you rethink your connections with others. It's good to see you've moved on and found someone who understands your work environment. Communication is key, and it sounds like you've got a healthy balance now. It's important to surround yourself with good people, regardless of gender. Glad you're in a better place.
In HS and college, this was me, but it was a role reversal. I tried to have friends of the opposite sex, but they kept wanting to hook up with me, and it kept breaking the friendships when I turned them down. Also, so this does not come across as a complete brag. I was very attractive during those years, but 100% am not anymore and have developed some great friendships with women in my later years.
Sounds like a tough spot to be in back then. Trying to keep things friendly while everyone has other ideas can really complicate things. It's good to hear you found great friendships later on. Sometimes it just takes a bit of time to figure out what works best for you and who you really connect with. Life has a funny way of balancing things out eventually.
Because women can have all kinds of difficult prerequisites and demands when choosing a guy loudly crying face, loudly crying face, loudly crying face, it's very hard to make friends, especially as an adult. We lose contact with many of our previous friends. That's just life. After reading this comment, I'm glad I'm a woman, and I probably won't have a guy demanding me to show I have friends of all genders. Because I wouldn't be able to comply. Uneasy face.
It's true that adult friendships can be tough to navigate. People come and go, and it feels like expectations keep changing. I can relate to that pressure, especially when it comes to dating and making connections. Sometimes you just want to be accepted for who you are, without all the extra baggage. It's like a balancing act, trying to please everyone while still being yourself.
It's super context sensitive. I believe OP Mint wanted to have access to phones and other personal items. Once you unlock a phone, you can pretty much open anyone's WhatsApp and Instagram profile, check someone's DM, see their browser's history, everything. Sure, it can be for something as harmless as changing the music, and the level of trust means that your partner knows you won't open up personal conversations. But not everyone has that level of trust, or had bad experiences when that happened.
It's interesting how sharing devices can highlight trust issues between people. I remember a friend once borrowed my phone to change a song, but I always felt uneasy about handing it over. It wasn't that I had anything to hide, but you never know someone else's intentions or past experiences. So I get why some folks might feel protective over their personal stuff. Trust really does play a big role in these situations.
If I had to guess, it's about complaining about somebody else, and the partner automatically protecting the other side, possibly downplaying your feelings. Not in a relationship, but I've experienced it sometimes elsewhere, and whether or not you're actually right, it can be a bit annoying if the other person always starts by assuming you misjudge the situation. Either person could be at fault here. One actually making an elephant out of everything, and the other not being critical enough of others, consequently not giving emotional support to the other. I'm just saying the commenter above us has a point.
I get what you're saying. There's a tendency for people to take sides, even when it might not be the right call. I remember a time when I was venting about a friend, and instead of listening, someone just defended them. It's frustrating when you're trying to express your feelings, and it feels like they're not really hearing you. Sometimes, a little understanding goes a long way.
I disagree and don't think that's love bombing. That's being a people pleaser. Those people need validation because they don't get it elsewhere, even if it's superficial and can be unprompted. I think love bombing is when they try to please you specifically after they wrong you. They do it so you'd fall in a false sense of security and think they won't wrong you again, or hope to make you forgive and forget that they wronged you. They might cover it up with flashy apologies, and then once the dust is settled, they do it all over again. Then if you get mad again, they love bomb again because it worked before. It's often a cover-up for something else.
I've seen this play out with a friend. They'd mess up, and then suddenly, they'd shower me with compliments and gifts. At first, it felt nice, but eventually, I realized it was just a cycle. Once they got what they wanted, things would revert back. It's like they were using it as a band-aid for their mistakes. It's frustrating when people don't learn from their actions.
If you're told, "I have a boyfriend," you definitely give off the wrong impression. Because it's also highly unusual to approach someone for friendship. That's what kids do on the playground, but not adults. Have you never just hung out with girls from shul, your buddies' girlfriends, your siblings' female friends, your friend's friend?
Sure, I've had some moments like that. You know how it goes, just chilling with friends and their partners. Sometimes it feels awkward at first, but it can lead to some good laughs. I think most people just need to relax about it. Yeah, I've hung out with my buddies' girlfriends a lot. It's all chill when everyone's just being themselves. Just part of life, I guess.
I've had a similar issue with someone in the past. I'm originally from New Zealand. I live in Taiwan now. And we're very British in our interactions, which means that we mercilessly tease our friends and are painfully polite to people we hate. The more you like someone, the closer your relationship is, the worse the insults/teasing is. Not every culture shares that behavioral idiosyncrasy, and those who don't can get quite upset at the constant jibes.
I get that. It's interesting how humor varies between cultures. In some places, teasing is a sign of closeness, while in others, it can really hurt feelings. I remember a friend who didn't get our jokes and took them seriously. It was awkward. We had to tone it down a bit, but it made me appreciate the differences in how we connect with each other. Just part of navigating friendships, I guess.
I don't want to expose his vulnerabilities talking publicly about it, but without going into detail. He has an inner problem related to his childhood that causes heated arguments over seemingly small things. He has always since the beginning ended up apologizing and admitting his mistakes. What he has worked on is reducing the number of arguments we have by large. He lets small things go and doesn't make a big deal of something that isn't as often. He sometimes slips up still, but I know that it is hard and he gives his best. I am deeply thankful that he works on it at all and is able to even admit his issue. He has, of course, never raised his hand at me or called me names or anything. It is just sometimes hours lost by arguing and moods kind of ruined until we make up again. We had phases of several times a week of this, and now it is just 1 to 3 times per month, in good phases down to 0. The rest of the time is nothing short of fairy tale type romance and unconditional emotional support as well as physical support, e.g. surgeries we've both recently had.
It's good to hear your friend is making progress. Childhood issues can be tough, and it's nice that he's recognizing it and trying to change. The reduction in arguments shows he's really putting in the effort. It's impressive that he's able to keep the bigger picture in mind too. Beyond those disagreements, it sounds like you guys have a solid bond, with genuine support and a lot of love for each other.
I think I will take op at their words and not read more than they actually said, which was / having / each other's passes, and I want to know why that's an inherent red flag. And yeah, it's gross when people break others' trust. And it's going to happen from time to time. It's part of the gamble that is trust and faith. Sometimes we put faith in people we didn't know at the time were untrustworthy. But it's worthwhile to do the work to realize that not everyone is the person that hurt you, and you have to start anew each time. Otherwise, you're left suspicious of everyone and further isolated from community care we all rightfully deserve. Also, y'all would do well to communicate with people in your DMs as if that shit could be read out in court. We live in a surveillance state. Also, I will say that someone wanting my passcode would make me feel a certain way. I do agree with that wholeheartedly. But if it happens organically, I don't think it's that big of a deal.
It's interesting how trust works between people. You can let someone in, but there's always a chance they might not be trustworthy. It's a risk we take. And yeah, the whole passcode thing can feel off, but if it comes up naturally, maybe it's not a huge red flag. Just gotta keep an open mind while also being smart about who you trust. Balance is key, I guess.
Apologizing and working on it are key, I think. Though I've never been in a relationship, it seems to me that the most important factor for a relationship surviving is being able to weather these unavoidable storms, not trying to completely avoid them. Obviously, I don't know his background, but I'm realizing as I get older how crucial and lasting those early childhood moments truly are. It took me decades to even understand the problems and their seemingly indelible impacts on me. It's very encouraging to hear of your compassion in this regard and of your focus on the positives. Hope he appreciates that.
It's interesting to hear about relationships that way. I've seen friends struggle but also grow when they face challenges head on. It's true what you said about childhood moments sticking with us. I guess it takes time to see how they shape us. It might sound cliché, but sometimes just understanding these things can make a difference. Hope your friend finds his way and learns from his past too.
He does appreciate it so much. Respectful communication is key. No matter how harsh the storm is, if name-calling begins or physical threats arise, the relationship is doomed. That is the key in my opinion, and definitely being able to admit and apologize. Then there are also people who can't forgive these mistakes, so letting go and understanding with empathy is key as well.
I get what you mean. Keeping communication respectful really matters in any relationship. When things get tough, it's easy to lose your cool, but that usually just makes things worse. Admitting you're wrong and genuinely apologizing goes a long way. It's also tough for some people to forgive, so understanding where they're coming from is important too. At the end of the day, it's about finding common ground.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.